Hello, everyone. Welcome to this exciting session of the TIES webinar series. I am Blake Tuchet, a member of the TIES Teacher Corps from Louisiana. On behalf of the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science, I am honored to welcome the scientist who made our institute a reality, Dr. Richard Dawkins. Dr. Dawkins is a fellow of the Royal Society and was an inaugural holder of the Charles Simonyi Chair of Public Understanding of Science at Oxford University. He is the acclaimed author of many books, including The Selfish Gene, God Delusion, The Magic of Reality, Climbing Mount Improbable, Weaving the Rainbow, The Ancestor's Tale, and The Greatest Show on Earth. He is the recipient of numerous honors and awards, including the Royal Society Literature Award, the Michael Faraday Prize of the Royal Society, Kistler Prize, Shakespeare Prize, the Lewis Thomas Prize for Writing About Science, the Galaxy British Book Awards Author of the Year Award, and the International Cosmos Prize of Japan. In conversation with Professor Dawkins today, we have Bertha Vasquez, the director of TIES. Bertha has been teaching middle school science in Miami-Dade County Public Schools for 27 years, an educator with the National Board certification. She's the recipient of several national and local honors, including the 2014 Samsung $150,000 Solve for Tomorrow contest and the $5,000 Charles Bartlett National Excellence in Environmental Award in 2009. She was Miami-Dade Science Teacher of the Year in 1997, 2008, and 2017. She is currently one of Florida's 2017 finalists for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. Thanks to the success of TIES, Bertha was the recipient of this.
That was a terrific introduction. Welcome, everybody. As Blake said, my name is Bertha Vasquez, and I'm so pleased to have my friend Richard Dawkins with us here today. I am moving to the presenter screen now, as you can all see. Whoa, this is not at the beginning. What happened? Okay. I'd like the participants to know that if they open the presentation in full screen, they will not see the questions that people are typing, and they will not see the webcams. So if you'd like to see the presentation in full screen, you will not be seeing the questions, but it's your choice, of course.
I'm fine, thank you.
How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Do I see questions on the screen? I can't see any at the moment. Oh, they're just coming, are they?
No. This is, do you see our picture at my school and
yes,
how TIES began? See it. Yes. Well, I wanted to give everybody a little bit of history first, why we're here together. Okay. I think it's a testament to your, how you believe in education, first and foremost. I met Richard a few years back, and I told him that I ran a few professional developments for my fellow middle school science teachers on evolution. And he called me and he said, "How can I help you?" And I thought he meant, like, can I send you resources? No, he meant, can I come to your school and help you present to these teachers that you're helping? I think that says it all. I really, really do. And as you can see from these pictures, he came to my school. Miami-Dade County opened it up to the entire county, so there were over 100 teachers there, and I sneaked in my students as well because I couldn't let them miss this opportunity. And 3 years later, as you can see from this screen, TIES has now presented, although it's blocked by the Richard Dawkins Foundation motto, we presented 75 workshops in 3 years.
That's an amazing.
And I just
that's
think
terrific.
That means,
congratulations on that.
Thank you, and it all thanks to your support. And I think it just shows that there's a need for this. There's a need for teachers helping teachers, and there's a need for covering content in workshops, in teacher workshops around the country. So Richard, our questions are coming from different places today. This one is coming from Kathleen McCullough, who is the writer of This Is Your Brain on Parasites. She did a webinar for us earlier this month. She has written about this amazing thing where this wasp attacks a spider, And the spider, instead of building a web, builds a hammock for the wasp's eggs, which is fascinating. And I wanted you to go ahead and explain the extended phenotype and why you think this is such an exciting example of it.
It's a beautiful example of an extended phenotype. The phenotype is normally part of the body in which the gene sits, so that the expression of the gene is in the body, but an extended phenotype extends outside the body. So a bird's nest is an extended phenotype. It's clearly under genetic control. You could clearly do artificial selection for shape of bird's nests if you wanted to. It would take a rather long time. It works, of course, through the behavior of the bird, but so what? It's still exactly the same as any other kind of phenotype. So what we have here is a manipulated phenotype, manipulated by this parasitic wasp, which is manipulating the brain of the spider, and it causes the spider to build this distorted web, which is a good thing for the parasite, but not for the spider. So it's a lovely example of an extended phenotype, where in this case a parasite is actually having phenotypic expression of the parasite genes in the phenotype generated by the spider.
What's amazing to me is that this isn't just a small change in the spider web. This must involve many biochemical pathways in the spider.
Yes, indeed. But of course, that's true of any genetic effect, even a normal phenotypic effect within an individual. That's a complicated interaction of many different biochemical effects. It's really the same.
Yes. Well, thank you. I get this question a lot in class. And I always use your wonderful thought experiment of going back in time and dropping off your time traveling example where you drop a person off 1,000 years ago, and would they be able to breed, and back and back and back and back. I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about this one again. I love listening to this one.
It's a sort of, some people think it's rather a paradox. They say, well, who was the first human? And there never was a first human. There was never a time when a baby was born that didn't have human parents and was a human itself. The whole process is gradual. As you go back and back and back in time, every baby born was the same species as its parents and its children. But if you go back sufficiently far, you come to a fish. And so because the change is so gradual, you don't notice it. But it's never true to say that there has to be a first human or a first ape or a first anything else. And that's something that people often have a great difficulty grasping. I call it the tyranny of the discontinuous mind, this insistence on drawing lines everywhere. And there aren't any lines in evolution.
Yes. Well, thank you. And if anybody want to read further on that, that's in The Magic of Reality. There's a picture of Richard's book for you there. So this is intriguing to me, the idea of the ancestors' trail. Have you heard about this?
Oh, yes.
Richard? They
yeah,
in your book,
I know about this.
Trail. Tell us about this.
Do you want to ask about it or what? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess tell us about the book and who thought of this. I know there's one in New York this year as well.
Well, The Ancestor's Tale, the book you see in the middle of the screen there, is written jointly with my colleague Yan Wong, who, by the way, his name should be an equal print to mine. So I'm rather annoyed with the publishers for putting mine bigger than his. Anyway, the idea, it is a history of life, but it's a history of life going backwards. And there's a very good reason for that. If you do your history of life going forwards, it looks as though evolution was aimed at whatever you end up with, which would normally be humanity. And it's understandable that you want to do humanity because we are human. But if you do a history of life, of evolution, and you start with bacteria and you go through the whole history and you end up with humans, it makes it look as though evolution was aiming at humans all along, which of course is nonsense. No more aiming at humans than at anything else. So what we did was to say, well, okay, we accept that people are interested in humans. So let's have humans as the end point. But we start off at the end point. and we go backwards to the origin of life. And it's cast in the form of a pilgrimage. And we use the model of Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. That's why it's called the Ancestor's Tale. So we start off as human pilgrims marching backwards in time. And at about 6 million years into the past, we meet the chimpanzee pilgrims who join us. And then this joint band of chimpanzee and bonobo pilgrims who've already joined. Then this joint band of pilgrims marches on backwards, and about 8 million years in the past, we are joined by the gorilla pilgrims, and then about 12 million years we're joined by the orangutan pilgrims, and so on, back and back and back and back. And each joint position, each joining position is called a rendezvous point. And there are only 30 of them because, that's a rather surprising fact, but there are only about 30 of them because at several of those joining points, those rendezvous points, we're joined by a vast concourse, a vast number of animals. For example, most of the invertebrates join us. I forget which rendezvous point it is. And then at each of these rendezvous points, one of the joining pilgrims tells a tale, or one or two or three of them tell a tale, which is a lesson in biology. For example, the grasshopper's tale is all about race, especially human race. And it's a tale which is relevant to that animal or plant. Well, the ancestor's trail was an idea thought up by a man called Chris Jenord in England. And watched it's a weekend hike. And the hikers join up for this occasion at the weekend, and they decide whether to be chimpanzee pilgrims or insect pilgrims or bird pilgrims. And they are dumped at various places around the countryside, and then they walk.
Oh, that is wonderful. I had no idea.
And then they walk, and the path is carefully arranged so that they join up at various places along this hike.
Oh, that's brilliant.
No, I haven't done it, but I've been in on the planning of it.
Okay,
that's lovely. Okay, and the idea has been taken up.
Oh,
the idea has been taken up in America, and I think in various places. So
I saw that there's one in New York.
I think there's going to be one in Canada too.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I had no idea that the pilgrims are coming in from different places.
It's quite hard to get the logistics right to make sure they reach at the right place.
I can imagine. Well, Leanne Davis is writing in the question and answers. The Ancestor's Tale is absolutely brilliant. It's a big read, but absolutely
it's nice to meet Leanne. Leanne's name is known to me because I see her. She contributes to my Twitter feed, and it's very nice to see that she's taking part in this.
Wonderful. Welcome, Leanne. So here's a great question. It's if Darwin were alive today, let's say you could take him out and just show him anything in the world. What do you think would absolutely astound him? What would you think about
I don't think he'd be that surprised about Lucy and Ardy because he was rather prescient in forecasting that when the evidence came in, it would turn out that humans did originate in Africa. So he would be delighted by Lucy and Ardy and the other African fossils, but he wouldn't be surprised. I think what would astound him would be DNA, and the fact that genetics is digital, which is a word he probably wouldn't even understand. He'd understand it when you explained it to him, but he would probably get the point that not only is it digital, it probably had to be digital in order for evolution to work. Analog genetics, I'm conjecturing here, I'm sticking my neck out, I don't think it would work. He would be absolutely thunderstruck and delighted by the fact that because DNA is digital, and because the astounding fact that every creature that's ever been looked at has the same genetic code, that means that they're all related. So his speculation that life might have originated more than once is wrong. He'd be delighted by that. And he would be delighted by the fact that you can use genetic sequencing to do taxonomic relationships of a kind that he did with skeletons and anatomy, but with far more precision and far more detail, because the genetic sequence in different animals and plants, because you can say this is the same gene, you can actually compare the detailed DNA sequence in different creatures and actually count the number of single letter differences between them, so that your taxonomy is wonderfully precise. And Darwin would be astounded and delighted by that.
Yes, yes. That's a wonderful thought experiment as well. What would you show someone like Galileo
Yes,
or
indeed.
Darwin,
Yes. Yeah.
Sir Isaac Newton? I wanted to talk about OneZoom, and I could actually share my screen and tell people about this wonderful project, which I think people are more familiar with this in the UK than they are in the United States. I'm gonna share my screen, Richard, and if you'd like to talk a little bit about this project.
Do you have a dynamics demonstration of it? Oh, great, good.
Yes, that's what I'm going to do. Do you see the screen now?
I see a still screen. Oh, wait a minute, it's off the side of my screen. Am I allowed to move it? There we are.
I don't think it's on my computer
screen. Yeah, it was off the edge of my screen, and I've now moved. Oh, okay, that's good. That's good. Shall I talk about it a bit, or okay?
Yes, please.
This is a project by a man called James Rosendell and his colleague Yan Wong, who's the same colleague as wrote The Ancestor Tale with me, and the two of them have produced this wonderful way of representing the tree of life. The thing is that if you think about the tree of life, the sheer number of species on it, perhaps, well, many millions, if you tried to draw it out on a piece of paper, the paper would be simply gigantic. If it was so that you could actually read the names, it would be huge. It would cover the whole of Manhattan Island. So the only way to do it, and James Rosendell realized this, is as a fractal, and that's what you're looking at now. So you can zoom around, you can fly over the picture. So there we're looking at one species, Emberiza, the black-headed bunting, and you can look at its close cousins. And now you can zoom back out. That's right. Yes, if you zoom back out, you can see where it fits. You can glide around, you fly around, you zoom in when you want to, you zoom out when you want to. You can move to any part of the living kingdoms, animal or plant, and find the animal you're looking for. You can type the name of your favorite species in there's a little search, that's right, Bertha's really quick on this.
I gotta show you
Bertha's tree frog, great, yes, wonderful. Okay. Did I present that to you?
So
yes, I did.
You did.
Yes, you're allowed to sponsor a species. You have to pay a small amount of money to get the project, to help the project along. And so I sponsored that for Bertha. I've got my own genus is called Dawkinsia. It's a genus of fish, and I sponsored that for various of my relations.
I'll look that up. Dawkinsia. There it is.
Good, yes. And there are several species.
I got to tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is great for the classroom.
Yes.
I share this with my students, and they just all go in different directions. And so they have a lot of fun with that. So I just stopped sharing my screen. I'm going to close this up and move it out of the way.
I do encourage all of you to look up OneZoom and yes, sponsor your favorite species for somebody you love.
Well, here I sponsored the bighorn sheep for my son.
Great,
Brendan.
Wonderful. Bighorn sheep, that's a terrific species.
Yeah, he loves the bighorn sheep, so I sponsored that for him. And I wanted to share that because the majority of the people with us today are teachers. And this is the type of thing where you share this with your students, OneZoom. You could walk out of the room and get coffee, and they won't even notice that you're gone. Not that you're supposed to do that, but... So Stephanie Keep is the editor of Reports, the National Center for Science Education. She's here with us today. And she asked some questions that I thought were very thoughtful, so I included some of them. What one evolution-related term would you ban if you could
I
ban
wouldn't be
just
so
one? She would ban.
Okay, that's a good one. I wouldn't be so intolerant as to actually ban anything, I don't think, but one that I absolutely hate,
Yes.
and I'm going to refuse to talk about it, is epigenetics.
Ah, yes. You did get a question about that, and I know you, so I did not. I'm not
No,
including
okay.
that in the presentation today. Here's the next one. What sorts of evidence should teachers cite when confronted by students with objection or concerns about evolution?
Okay, well, there's a lot of it, of course. The first thing that springs to many people's minds is fossils, and fossils are great evidence for the actual history of evolution, but they're probably not the best evidence for the fact that it's happened. I think for that, comparative molecular biology is probably the most powerful because, as I was saying a bit earlier, you can sequence. Now sequencing has become so cheap and quick that it's possible to sequence any species you like, and a lot of species have been done. And so, if not the whole genome, just simply one protein or one gene, and you can actually show that it falls in a hierarchy, a branching tree hierarchy. And what could that be other than a pedigree? Also very powerful is geographical distribution of animals and plants. The distribution of species, Darwin himself was very big on this, the distribution of species on the islands and continents of the world is exactly as it should be if evolution has taken place, and exactly as it should not be if animals were created or if they emerged down the gangplank of Noah's Ark or something like that. The fact that you've got virtually nothing but marsupials in Australia, for example, you can't explain that on the dispersal from Mount Ararat,
Right.
Noah's Ark. But the Galapagos Islands, the Hawaiian archipelago, Madagascar, the distribution of animals on the different islands, archipelagos, and continents of the world is exactly what it should be if evolution were true. So I would say, I think, first of all, comparative molecular biology, then comparative anatomy, then geographical distribution, and perhaps fossils last of all, but fossils are also important.
You call them icing on the cake in the ancestor's tale.
I mean, we know evolution was true even if we didn't have a single fossil. Fossils are a bonus.
Right. Well, I had to look at the state standards, curriculum standards of every U.S. state to prepare the presentation that we use as TIES presenters. Many states, the only evidence that you need to talk about in your classroom is fossils. But in our TIES presentation, I have 7 different or multiple lines of evidence, one of them being fossils, but also, as you said, genetic evidence, comparative anatomy, vestigial structures, artificial selection. And number 2 is biogeography. So what we try to do in our TIES presentations is meet or exceed the curriculum standards.
That's very good. And I forgot to mention artificial selection, which is, of course, very powerful evidence, because if you wanted to do an experiment to actually manipulate selection, what would you do other than artificial selection? And the fact that a Pekingese and a poodle and a whippet are all wolves, all think they're wolves, is
yes, my dog definitely thinks she's a wolf. We had a tamed Siberian fox come to the first TIES presentation on April 4th, 2015, which was really a fun thing. So here's another Stephanie Keep question. What is the most troublesome misconception about evolution?
I suppose it might be that it's sort of instantaneous. It's the, I'll believe in it when I see a monkey give birth to a human kind of thing. It's simply the failure to understand the massive time lapses that are involved. suppose that would probably be the main one. Another one, no, perhaps even more important, is the idea that it's a theory of chance, the idea that you can disprove it by doing some stupid statistical calculation, like saying, imagine taking all the bits of a human and randomly shaking them, like, throwing a dice or something and getting a human. They really think that's what it's about. They have not the foggiest clue about natural selection. They think it's a theory of chance. And it really, really is important to get across that it is not a theory of chance. Natural selection is the very opposite of random chance.
Yes, I've heard in some workshops the famous, how could a tornado go through a junkyard and build a
Yes, that's right.
747? I get that one.
That's an utterly infuriating one. Yeah, they just don't understand natural selection.
Yes, I think that's the biggest problem with misconceptions.
I should have mentioned
just a lack of understanding. Yes. So this is again, Stephanie said she'd mention ostrich legs as the answer to this question. If you had to talk to someone who had never heard of evolution, where would you start?
I never.
She would start with ostrich eggs. That's a tough one. See, don't you wish I had given these to you ahead of time?
Well, no, I mean, tell me why she chooses ostrich legs.
Because as you can see from the picture that I found, they look like
they are, of course, dinosaurs, yes, and that's not surprising.
Yes.
I think I might. Well, Darwin started, or pretty early started, with domestication, which I think is very powerful. I think I might do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might do that actually. Do what Darwin did. Take the domestication, artificial selection of dogs or cabbages or roses, and say, just look what can be done in a few centuries of selection if humans do it. And then you don't actually need a human selector to do it. Nature will do it for you. And in The Greatest Show on Earth, I think I bridge that gap going via sexual selection, where a peahen can be thought of as a bit like a human breeder, breeding dogs or breeding roses, but in this case choosing peacocks. And then having
done them outside my window.
Yes, and then having done a peahen doing selecting, they say, well, you don't need a peahen either. Survival will do the job for you. So I think that is a very powerful sequence of arguments, and it's the one that Darwin used.
Yes, I agree. That is good. So I think this is the last question Stephanie gave me. What role should or could practicing scientists play in helping to improve evolution literacy? As I typed this question in, I thought of all these wonderful people, including yourself, that I think they're already playing a marvelous role, but you have to seek it out.
What have we got there? We've got Wilson, we've got Bill Nye the Science Guy, we've got Carl Sagan, we've got David Attenborough, Jane Goodall. Is that Jane Goodall? Yes. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, all great promoters of science. I think that it's an important part of a scientist's job and duty to improve science literacy in their own particular field, and in our case that means evolution literacy. I think there was a time when the NSF in America made it a condition for giving a scientist a research grant that they had to devote some of their time to explaining what they were doing to the general public. And I think that's a rather good rule. I'm not sure if it still applies.
Yes.
But very often scientists are actually rather good at explaining what they do. Sometimes they're very bad. But I think it's probably not true to say that you have to have journalists doing the explaining while scientists get on with the science. I think that scientists themselves have a responsibility to do the explaining. And I think also not just explaining to lay people, but explaining to each other. I think the standard of science communication in specialized science journals is rather poor. And it would be a good idea if scientists, when writing their own research papers, took into account the possibility that the paper might be read not by extreme specialists, but by at least other scientists in other scientific disciplines.
Yes. What you mentioned about scientists sharing their data, one of our participants, Don Haas, says that that's still a requirement of the National Science Foundation.
Good. Yes.
I also saw there was a Twitter, something on Twitter a few months back. John Mead is with us. Maybe he'll remember what it was called, where scientists were typing in hashtag scientist or something like that and sharing what they do with the general public. John Mead is typing in now, and I saw hundreds and hundreds of scientists typing in, hi, my name is John Adams and I work with seashells, or things like that. And it was a wonderful thing to share with
I didn't see that, but that's
here it
nice.
is. Why I study actual living scientist, hashtag actual living scientist.
Good, I'll look that up.
And there were hundreds of people involved in that.
I think it's pretty widely known that Carl Sagan, who's in the picture you put up there, was not elected to the National Academy of Sciences because he was a great popularizer. And that I think is a scandal, because he was a great scientist as well. And I think that wouldn't happen. I mean, I have been elected to the Royal Society, and I probably wouldn't have been on the Carl Sagan rule in that time. So I think that climate is changing. But there has been a kind of snobbery in the world of science against scientists who do take the trouble to communicate.
I agree. So I think I know what you're going to say here, but what is currently the most exciting new discovery in science, in your opinion? And it doesn't have to be biology or evolution.
Oh, I see. Well, if it was physics, I suppose it might be LIGO, the discovery of the gravitational waves when two black holes collide with each other. It's an astounding feat of precision measurement. The impact that the gravitational waves have when they reach Earth is so tiny. It's just, I've forgotten what the figure is, but there's some dramatic illustration of how minute the gravitational wave effect is. Obviously, you have to subtract off the effect of trucks rumbling by and things, and so that's done by having two different instruments. I think one in Oregon and one in I think Louisiana, maybe. I think it's Louisiana.
I'm not sure. We saw that lecture together.
I mean, it's a very nice illustration. You can't possibly do it in just one place. It's got to be done in two places a long way apart, so that you could subtract off the effect of interference. It is a triumph. It's a triumph of precision measurement. It makes one proud to be human.
Yes, it does. And Blake Touche just added here in the question and answer that it is indeed in Louisiana. So I recall that lecture. Okay, how about this? I'm making you work hard today, Richard. I know it's late for you. But if you could pick one thing, one piece of knowledge that all humans should understand to make this world a better place, what would it be?
I'm an academic, and so I tend to gravitate away from trying to give humans a better time, social welfare and things. So I suppose, I think, why don't we say evolution? Because it's so important, because it actually is the explanation for our own existence, because it's so utterly fascinating, the fact that that the laws of physics, just atoms and molecules bumping into each other, because of this astonishing process of natural selection, gives rise to all the diversity and complexity of life. That is an amazing fact. And I think that anybody who goes to their grave without understanding, well, why they exist in the first place is just tragically missing out. Also, of course, it does have social consequences. It is important to understand that, I mean, evolution, one of the lessons it teaches is that we are all human, we're all one species, so racism is nonsense, that kind of thing. So I think that it does have social welfare benefits as well as academic benefits.
I agree. That's true. Speaking of racism, we did not plan this, but it happened like this. Dr. Leslie Jones, Richard, is a professor at Valdosta State University. She's here. I saw her in the chat room. She and I did the first workshop last November. It was a mix of science teachers and future science teachers. And I think this is a really important area, a very important group of people that we should help, which is future science teachers. And here's her question. Our understanding of human evolution can be used as an anti-racist strategy. So in a sense, you
Yes.
already answered this. Shouldn't we promote this more
Well,
as
we should. I mean, it is true that the human species is actually astonishingly genetically uniform, which is quite surprising when you think of skin color. I mean, because obviously we are very, very different in that one respect and a couple of others as well. But compared to other species, we are very uniform genetically. We are one species and a very close species. I think it's been said that any two chimpanzees from the same African forest are far more different from each other than any two humans anywhere in the world.
Genetically.
It does leave open the question of why skin color is so variable, and protection from the sun is clearly one possible answer. But superficially, if a Martian were to visit Earth and looked at us, I suppose the Martian would think, gosh, they are really very, very different. But if you look at the underlying genetics, we're not.
Yes, and that, just like you were saying before, the one thing that all humans could know to make this world a better place, understanding evolution helps you understand why racism just doesn't make sense. These are genetic differences.
Well, I mean, even if there were major differences in human races, it would be utterly immoral to base any kind of social policy on that. To give somebody a job because they're the right race, or not give them a job because they're the wrong race, or something of that sort. So, as it happens, there aren't these major differences. But even if there were, it would be immoral to discriminate on the basis of such features as skin color.
Yes. I thought you'd like to see a picture of the students.
Yes.
Here's Blake again, and these are the students that sent the following questions to me for you.
Are those all teachers?
Nope, Blake is in the front, and it looks like his class is high school.
I can't see enough detail.
Some of those gentlemen, yeah, they have beards, those guys. They don't look like middle schoolers. Blake is typing, so this is a high school class, Blake, we take it. And this is in Louisiana. That's our science club, says Blake. So here's their first question, which I think is an amazing question for high school kids. One objection about evolution education is, if students learn about survival of the fittest, it will lead to a selfish or barbaric society. Do you think that teachers discussing the evolution of altruism or morals with students could help overcome?
Well, not really. I think it's irrelevant because it's the is-ought distinction which philosophers go on about. There is no doubt at all that natural selection is the explanation for our existence, but that doesn't mean that we have to base our society on it. It doesn't mean we have to say, oh, because natural selection favors whatever you say, I mean, ruthless selfishness, if it did, which it doesn't necessarily, but if it did, even if it did, that would be no reason whatsoever to base your society on that. Quite the contrary. I think that if natural selection is an unpleasant, selfish process, and to some extent it is, then we should learn about it in order to learn what to avoid, in order to learn how not to organize our society. We should organize our society in a very un-Darwinian, non-Darwinian way. I've often said in the past that I'm a passionate Darwinian when it comes to explaining why we exist, but I'm a passionate anti-Darwinian when it comes to planning our society and our politics. Now, of course, it might help to go into the evolution of altruism as well, and that's a very good thing to do, and that's what the selfish gene does. As I like what you've written there, the selfish gene, the altruistic animal. It could well have been called the altruistic animal. But even if natural selection did not predict altruism, which it does, it would still be wrong to base our society on our perception of evolution, our perception of natural selection. We can break away from that. We can rebel, as I put it in the selfish gene. We can rebel against the tyranny of the selfish genes and plan our society, design our morals by what you could almost call intelligent design.
I heard you say once that you could tell your genes
That was
to go
Steven
jump in a
Pinker.
lake. Oh,
Steven
Steven
Pinker
Pinker
said,
that.
I'm not going to have any
He
children,
was,
and if my selfish genes don't like it, they can go jump in the lake.
I saw him a week ago here in Miami promoting his book. Yeah. I think I might skip that one because I see a lot of people have questions. Is there a biological explanation for consciousness? This is coming from your high school students that you saw in the photograph there. At what point did consciousness evolve?
Of course, there is a biological explanation for consciousness, but I don't have it. And I don't think anybody does. At what point did it evolve? Well, we don't know that. We don't, strictly speaking, know even that each other is conscious. So all we really know for sure is that we ourselves, that I myself am conscious, and you know that you yourself are conscious. But I don't, strictly speaking, know that you are. The reason I believe you are is that I know I am, and we're very similar, and we come from the same sort of origin. And so it'd be very surprising. We have the same kind of brain. So it'd be very surprising if you weren't conscious. And the same argument applies to other species. So the argument would be, well, chimpanzees are very like us. They have very similar genes to us, similar brains to us. So they probably are conscious as well. But earthworms perhaps are not, because they're not very like us, and they evolved from, they bifurcated from us a very, very long time ago. So I think it's an argument from analogy to ourselves, really. And I don't think it's possible to answer. From a moral point of view, I think when we decide how to treat other species, the right principle should be to give them the benefit of the doubt, and to assume, unless we've got a rather good reason not to, that they probably are capable of feeling pain, and therefore we shouldn't inflict pain and suffering on them. I've even made an argument that because if you think about what pain is for, pain is a signal to the animal to not repeat what it's just done. So if the animal has just done something which causes it to feel pain, that's a kind of signal that if it does it again, it might actually kill itself or reduce its chance of survival. And so if you think that that's what pain is for, then a species which is highly intelligent, like ours, probably needs less pain in order to drive home the point than a species which is less bright, which is less clever, and might actually need more pain. And so far from assuming that the brainier a species is, the more likely they are to have consciousness, and especially to feel conscious pain, we might take the opposite view and say that less brainy species are more likely to feel pain. That's the moral point. That's not the point about consciousness itself.
That's true. I'm going to skip that. A lot of people are asking questions in the chat box, and I want to leave time for them. So this is the last one. One of the best things about your books, especially The Ancestor's Tale, The Magic of Reality, is that you talk a lot about really interesting animals. I use this in my classroom. I've walked in my hallway in my house, and I hear your voice, and I turn into my son's room, and he is listening to an audio recording of The Ancestor's Tale about the dodo bird.
Delighted.
So I know I share these animals with my students, and I wanted to know if you had to pick one of these, and I'm going to open a poll.
Okay.
Everybody is
Okay, well,
going
we
to
have a duck-billed
choose
platypus on the
what
left.
their
We
favorite
have
animal is here.
nautilus in the middle top. We have leafy sea dragon going around,
That's for your
axolotl,
one.
tardigrade, and ii. Well,
That's
I
right.
told you I had a fish called Dawkinsia. I've also got a tardigrade. So yes, so
Really?
I'm quite keen on the tardigrade, and I love them anyway. They're called water bears, and they're delightful. They're tiny, of course. I mean, you can't see them with the naked eye hardly, but they're so wonderful, slow and dignified, and just charming. The ii is just superbly diabolical and funny. The duckbill, that was originally thought to be a hoax when it was first sent to museums from Australia, because it looks like a sort of mishmash of different kinds of animal. I love it too. Nautilus, I love. I mean, it's such a weird animal. It's like a Martian, I think. And the leafy sea dragon,
Yes.
just a beautiful example of camouflage. I mean, look at that. It's a perfect mimic of seaweed. It's just, you could almost tell which genus. It's fucus. It's almost which species of fucus it is. So, gosh, and the axolotl being a pedomorphic animal, a grown-up larva. That's wonderful too. I'd have a hard time picking one of those. I suppose it'd have to be the tardigrade.
Well, everybody, I am allowing you to vote. We know Richard's answer. It's the tardigrade. I cannot choose among these. It's too hard for me. I think I'll go with II because of their extended
Yes.
middle finger. I'm seeing a lot of polling happening here. Oh, the II is way ahead.
When I
The
met
tardigrade.
an in I think in Carolina, I saw this huge, great finger coming out of the box in which it was, and then the little face peeped out, and then it very, very delicately picked up and used its finger to pick its nose.
Oh no. I'm glad I picked the II then. And I have found tardigrades in my pitcher
I bet you
plants in my
have. Yes, how
backyard.
lovely.
I've used my
Yeah.
microscope on them. Yes. Okay, everybody, you have about 15 more seconds in the poll here. I'm gonna end the poll.
Well, it's not a clear winner, is it?
I'm gonna broadcast the results. Oh, I didn't mean to show everybody that. I totally messed up. Back to poll. Here we go. So it looks like the tardigrade by a tardigrade, a
Yes.
microscopic amount, won over the II. So wonderful. Everybody voted. There was nobody abstained from voting. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to move that out of here. Everybody, at the end, I am going to put a link to help if you could donate to ties. These are in orange, the number of states that we have presented in. And the gray states are the ones that we are hoping to present in this year or maybe next year. But as you can see, we've made quite a dent in the states in
I'd
the
just like to
last
say
few
something. I
years.
think Ties is a superb enterprise. I really do. I really love it. And to show my confidence in it, I would like to donate $1,000 tonight.
Oh God, thank you. That is great. Thank you so much, Richard. And there's at least 10 TIES Teacher Corps members here with us tonight. So we all greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I wanted to let everybody else know that on April 4th, and I will share that link as well, on April 4th, John Mead is presenting the second part of a series, Meeting Naledi. Sorry, I always say that wrong. Meeting Naledi, why human evolution should be used in science classrooms. So join us for that. There's still some room in that webinar, and it is on Wednesday evening, April 4th. We got great reviews for the first one. I'm going to go ahead and open this up here and scan through some of these questions. Richard, there's a few that I really liked. Jonathan Tweet wrote a book called Grandmother Fish. It's a book for preschoolers on evolution. And his question, which I saw here, was, at what age do you think, how old students should be when they first learn about evolution in school, and what should the first lesson be?
Well, I've always thought that it should be the first chapter of the textbook instead of the last chapter of the textbook, which it often is. What age?
Yes.
I don't see why it shouldn't be really quite young. It's not a difficult idea to grasp.
At all.
I think it could be really
Yes,
very
if
young.
I may say something.
Yes.
I teach biology, I teach biochemistry and genetics and Mendel. The evolution chapter is the easiest one for the students to understand.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. Good.
Okay, I have more questions up here in the front, towards the top. With the cancellation, this is from Leanne Davis. With the cancellation of ASU Origin's 10th anniversary, do you have any plans to do any standalone events with Lawrence Krauss? I'm still going to Arizona later tonight, as I already had the trip planned.
Yes, that's very sad. I had to cancel. I cancelled my trip to Arizona, and my trip to Australia, which was to have been with him. He's not going to Australia now, so there are no plans at the moment. No.
Chance Duncan is a TIES Teacher Corps member. How do you talk about humans being animals to a student who is in her first year in public school out of a very religious homeschool environment?
Right.
That is tough, yes.
I'm not a very tactful person. I tend not to wear kid gloves. I would tend to just go straight out and say, "You are an animal. Live with it."
I think it's not that you're not tactful. You don't suffer fools well.
I would say, you're not an animal. Well, you're not a plant, you're not a fungus, and you're not a bacterium. So what else is there? Of course you're an animal. Don't be so stupid.
I'm not letting you come to my classroom.
No, you should.
I'm going to get in trouble.
They need to be taught home truths.
Yes. I do. I'm just a little more subtle than you are. Here we go. Interesting question. From Quishi Wang, I believe he's in Quebec, what additional experimental evidence for evolution can be discovered in the foreseeable future with current technology? Goodness.
Well, with more of the same, I think. I mean, just lots more molecular genetic evidence, lots more fossils. I can't think of anything that's sort of radically of a different kind, but it would just be more and more evidence of the same kind, of the same kinds.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of anything?
Here, this is a question for both of us. The only thing I can think of is along the lines of DNA. If we're going to be able to sequence the DNA of organisms that today,
oh sure, that's what I mean by more of the same. I mean, we could get DNA. I imagine a future time. In fact, Yan Wang suggested this to me, where you could be walking through a forest with an instrument in your knapsack and a needle. You just poke it into a tree or poke it into an animal, and it tells you the DNA. Technology of the future.
Bonnie, you may have to help me with this one. I don't know what it means. So what are Dr. Dawkins' feelings about using biocontrol agents such as Wolbachia? In your opinions, do we have sufficient knowledge of the possible consequences?
I think we have to exercise the precautionary principle and to be cautious about using anything that might get out of hand. And that's a general principle for all kinds of innovations.
Yes. What is Wolbachia? For
I
those
have
of
no
us who are
idea.
not
I mean,
aware.
I'm just assuming it's some kind of biological control.
Oh, here she says it's a parasite that affects reproductive
Well,
behaviors of mosquitoes.
all sorts of biological control like that. Um, they can be useful, but they can get out of hand, and it's happened over and over again that they have got out of hand.
We have a question from a non-educator, so I think I should pick on Nicole Cipada. She's a genetic engineer. What advice would you give to the field as far as ethical dilemmas? For example, selection for eye color, math, or musical capability.
There
Thank you.
is widespread agreement that we should not indulge in uh, positive eugenics, but that we can indulge in negative eugenics. So you can use techniques to get rid of disadvantageous genes like hemophilia, and that can be done already. I mean, not necessarily hemophilia, but using IVF, where you have fertilized eggs in a petri dish, and you take one, say, wait till it's reached the 8-cell stage, and then you can remove one cell and examine the genes of that one cell, and so you can then decide which of the dozen or so eggs should be the one that's implanted back in the woman, and you can avoid the ones that have hemophilia or Huntington's chorea, whatever it is. So I think there's rather little controversy about that. There's much more controversy about using similar techniques for choosing eye color, musical ability, mathematical ability, and so on. You get very unpopular if you suggest that that might not be such a bad thing. I'm not quite sure why. I think it's possibly because of Hitler. Before Hitler came along, quite a lot of people, even on the political left, were quite keen on eugenics. What was wrong with Hitler really was that he was a dictatorial eugenicist. He actually wanted to force people to breed or not to breed, and that, of course, is horrendous, is horrible. But if it's a matter of voluntary, people saying, well, doctor, I'd quite like to have a child who's good at music. If you couldn't do that yet, but in sometime in the future, is that really so different from saying, I want my child to be good at music, and therefore I'm going to make my child have piano lessons and practice every day, which of course many parents do, and they can be quite tyrannical about it. So I don't really see any very great moral difference between asking a doctor to choose which of the eggs to implant back in an IVF case, choose the one that has musical ability. I don't see that that's any more reprehensible than making a child take violin lessons when it doesn't want to.
Several people are asking you to recommend books for secondary ed. That means age 14 to age 17 or 18 years old. Books for young adults on evolution.
Gosh,
I know The Inner
yes, that's
Fish
very good.
by Neil
That's
Shubin is a
excellent.
really good one.
That's not specifically aimed at teenagers, though, is it?
No, it's not at all, but they can
Yes.
understand it. Specifically aimed at teenagers, I can't think of any. Maybe people could type them
Yes,
in
I
here at the
can't really
bottom.
think of any. I mean, there are lots of good books around. I feel hesitant to mention some because I have a fear of not mentioning, leaving some out.
Right. Oh, here's a great one from John Mead in Texas, who is going to run our workshop, and this might be the last one that I have time for. If you were starting your research career today as a young scientist, what evolutionary topic would you elect to dive into?
I hate that sort of question.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I know it's not
Well, that's true.
epigenetics.
Well, no, epigenetics is just development. I mean, it's just embryology. That's what's so much misunderstood, and that's fine. I mean, embryology is a fascinating subject. Evo Devo would be fascinating.
Yes.
Gosh, there are so many possibilities. I mean, I used to be quite good with computers. I think probably something that involved computing. Um, my friend and colleague Yan Wong, my co-author of The Ancestor's Tale, is now doing extremely exciting work um, on genetics, and I think I might do something along those lines. I mean, one thing he did, which is actually in The Ancestor's Tale, was he used my genome, which has been sequenced for a strange television purpose. So my complete genome is
I
available,
saw that.
and he used my genome to make inferences about human history, human demography. You can use a single individual's genome by comparing the genes from the maternal side and the paternal side and looking at how far back the common ancestor of each gene pair is, which you can do
Oh my goodness.
statistically. And he found that a great majority of my genes, of my pairs of genes from my father and my mother, coalesce 60,000 years ago, which probably means that,
Oh
that
my
the
goodness.
ancestral stock from which I come went through a bottleneck 60,000 years ago, so that there were very few people around to mate with, and therefore there was a lot of inbreeding at that time 60,000 years ago. And that you can do from just a single individual's
That's
genome.
fascinating.
So I think I might do something on
That's wonderful.
statistical genetics.
Well, Professor Dawkins, it's late for you, I know. We've kept you here a little over time. I want to thank you again for joining us. This has been such a treat, and this is the first webinar without any technical
Okay,
difficulties.
obviously I'm responsible for that.
So that's, yes, you are. Thank you. And thank you for your generous donation. Everybody, I'm going to bid Richard good night, but you could stay, and the web links here will be open so that you can check out the many links that we discussed here today. Thank you all for coming. And thank you. You can click out now. I'm going to leave the window open.
I just wanted to say
hey,
thank
everybody,
you.
I have the web links here. Hey, Blake. I was just letting you. You're very welcome, and thank you for the introduction. I'm going to leave these web links up here for you all. If you want to go directly to the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science and learn more, we have the TIES Facebook, TIES Twitter. You could donate to TIES today, as Richard just did. We're very grateful about that. You could check out OneZoom, which is that wonderful classroom resource that we discussed where kids can zoom in and out of the different parts of the Tree of Life. And you could register for John Mead's April 4th webinar. It is 8 o'clock, April 4th, Eastern Standard Time. And I'll stick around a little further if anybody has any questions or anything, because it's much earlier for me than it is for Richard Dawkins.
Bertha, I wanted to ask, I had a question from a few of the other members. Where are the videos archived so that we can have them accessible to other teachers?
You mean the webinar videos, the previous webinars? Okay. The person in charge at the Center for Inquiry, she was having trouble with the audio. So this is the first one that I'm using a secondary software so she can fix any of the audio issues. If they'd like to see John Mead's first webinar or Kathleen McCullough and so forth, I have copies. I think I can make them available. She just didn't want to post them on the page because she didn't think the audio was great. But if you email me, let me put my email in here, guys. I don't know as much as she does, so I didn't even realize there was audio issues. There is my email, everybody. You can feel free to email me, and I can send you copies of the previous webinars. Evo amigos. Adios, Evo amigo Paxton Culpepper. That was fun, don't you think? I'm going to sign off my webinar so you don't have to see my face anymore, but I will leave this open for those of you that would like to continue to download or communicate with each other. I'm sure you're like the reason for ties is teachers and other evolution lovers are great resources for each other. So go ahead and make some connections.